make me think of my history,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
and it's not easy.
Uh-huh.
I was thinking about those great Disney movies because they have lots of
Oh, great.
There's always a
villains.
villain in a Disney movie, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Cruella de Vil.
Yeah, that's that new one now. There's
Uh-huh.
there's a great there's some stuff going around.
You posted something on Facebook.
Yeah.
A review. I
Yeah.
remember Meredith really liked it. Yeah.
Sort of movies lately that have been looking at the background of villains,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to help us understand why or how there's always something behind why somebody does something evil or wrong or has that. Yeah.
Uh-huh. So yeah, a lot of the best villains have backstories.
Yeah.
And they're somewhat conflicted.
And I think I haven't seen that new one, Cruella, yet, but I understand that it sort of shows some insight into why she became who she was, and that it was a history of being hurt and treated poorly and
Yeah.
mean girls and other stuff in her life.
It's a great point. I don't know where we heard it, but the hurting people hurt people. It's kind of passed on a lot of times. Just
Hurt
like
people hurt people.
Yeah, just like the good stuff can be passed on, right?
There's a great quote from a Franciscan monk named Richard Rohr that have used a lot here over the years. If you don't transform your pain, you will transmit your pain.
If you don't transform your pain, you'll transmit your
Yeah.
That's good. Mm-hmm.
Think about when you're hurting. If you don't actively do something in your life to transform that into something better, right? Then you're gonna take that hurt and you're gonna end up passing it on to other people in all different kinds of ways.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if you don't transform your pain, you'll transmit your pain.
It may take steps to answering that age-old question, right? Or if God is all good and all powerful, why do some bad things happen? Yeah. Well, for one thing, people are doing some bad stuff down here, places in God. But I've found personally that pain is one of the great change agents. I naturally want things to go smooth as easy and stay the same.
Keep things
As
the way they
long
are.
as things are good. But when things get tough, I seem to be motivated to make some changes.
Yep.
So this section that we're going over today is on the villainous. It's on the wicked. It's two little short poems in this section. Now we've been in Proverbs, in which we understand that Proverbs gives a recipe for a life, a flourishing, happy life. It takes wisdom from the natural world and from nature and human relations and all these things, and kind of gives good sound advice. Like we talked about, Proverbs works in probabilities. They're not always do this and always this happens. Life doesn't work that way, right? It's like, this may be the best route. I know if I don't go play in traffic on 421, I'm less likely to get hit by a car. Right?
Doesn't mean you won't get hit by a car.
It doesn't
but
mean
you're
I
less
won't
likely
get
to
hit by a car, but I get, yeah, exactly. Exactly. So it's like making these choices and everything, and gives instruction on to act on all matters of life, and even covers the big issues such as money, sexuality, and all these things that we've been through earlier in this chapter, even where it's that famous thing, be like an ant. Jason talked about it a few weeks ago, right? You ever seen an ant as a role model? A-N-T? Yeah.
Small but strong.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a great example of the writer of Proverbs using things from the natural world and seeing in God's creation these spiritual truths that we can learn. And it also shows the connection between spiritual realities and life in the world.
Mm.
That they're not all separate, they're intertwined.
Mm-hmm.
We can see this just in this chapter alone, where it talks about weather, it talks about animals, and it talks about human relations, all tied in, talking about money.
So we're in chapter 6, right?
Yep, chapter 6. And today we're in 12 through 19,
Okay.
but just a little overview of what comes before.
Mm-hmm.
So all these elements in the natural world almost show us spiritual realities.
Hmm.
Yeah. As we talked about before, all the Proverbs is it's shown through a family relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You have a father talking to his child,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have Lady Wisdom, is like the star of the show. And the fact
Mm-hmm.
that wisdom is personified as a lady in different ways. There at the beginning, during creation, she was likened to a prophet calling out in the street. She throws a banquet for people coming and builds a house for them. And in the end, she is further personified as like the face, this wonderful wife. So you have in the picture that wisdom is transmitted through families, and families' key role of transferring this.
Wisdom is a wonderful wife. What
Yes.
are you talking about, Ryan?
Oh, I thought that
It's not just like.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I gotcha. Yes. Yeah. She is a wonderful wife. Yeah. It's a wonderful life. So let's get into this one. 6, the villains. Now I'll be reading from the NIV. So it says, a troublemaker and a villain who goes about with a corrupt mouth, who winks maliciously with his eye, signals with his feet, motions with his fingers, who plots evil with deceit in his heart. He always stirs up conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, disaster will overtake him in an instant. He will suddenly be destroyed without remedy. There are 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, feet that are quick to rush to evil, a false witness who pours out lies, and a person who stirs up conflict in the community. So we have 2 short poems back to back. That's what that is.
That's such an interesting list of things.
Isn't it? Yeah.
We love to talk about the 10 Commandments or whatever, but here's this list of, let's see, 1, 2, I mean, it says 6, 7.
Mm-hmm.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 things that are listed here. And they're not do nots, right?
Right.
They're like, these are things that God doesn't like.
Yeah. They're like observations.
Mm-hmm.
The first one's like the personal observation. This is the writer of this telling his take on what evil looks like.
I've never in my life ever heard anybody point to Proverbs 6 and talk about, oh yeah, this, the 7 things God doesn't like.
No.
Never heard that. Anybody? I've never heard that in my life. No one's ever talk about the 10 Commandments. Yeah.
The one thing I constantly hear is the 10 commandments, not what he doesn't like. It's God forgive everybody, but, and then whatever they think.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So almost, are you saying like almost throwing them out the window? They don't
Kind of.
matter? Yeah.
They'll always point out the 10 commandments. They'll always go to the Bible about whatever they don't think, about whatever they think they should.
Should or shouldn't do?
Yeah, should or shouldn't do. And then they'll go, well, God loves you, except, and then list their opinions instead of his.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
We cherry pick what you like and what you don't like about what. Yeah. Yep. People do a lot of that with the Bible, right?
Boy. Mm-hmm. People who don't know it, and some people who do it for a living.
Yeah. You mean pastors do that?
Yes.
Could be.
So it is, and it's notice. Let's start with the troublemaker and the villain. Now, are you got? Do you got the NIT there or the?
I got
NET?
the net.
Yeah,
pulled
the net.
up. Yeah.
What words they
NET.
use there for troublemaker and villain?
In let's see.
12.
You're looking at verse 12. Let me
Yeah.
pull back there. Worthless and wicked.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Worthless. That's pretty harsh.
What is your formula? I'm sorry.
Verse 12.
It's just troublemaker and villain goes about with corrupt mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Troublemaker villain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. This one's pretty harsh. Worthless.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's almost.
Dang. I don't think of anybody as worthless.
Mhm.
Gosh.
It's like of no value.
Yeah.
No value.
Good for nothing.
Good for nothing. So it's somewhat. It's like a little less than devilish, but
Not a lot.
not a lot. Not a lot. But look, the first thing that's listed is going about with a corrupt mouth. So to me, that spoke to the power of words and the importance of words and speaking truth. Like Paul says, speaking the truth in love. And like we know, the power of words in God's creation. God spoke, and the universe responded.
So this guy here is sort of the opposite in terms of that. Like what this person says is worthless and wicked.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So almost sets this person up as the opposite,
Mm-hmm.
doing the opposite of what God does and what God is asking us to do.
That's it. It really does. And the villain is using, it's not just his mouth, it's like all his body parts.
Because then he winks with his eyes, signals with his feet, points with his fingers.
Yes.
Eyes, feet, and fingers.
So there's a lot of nonverbal communication going on.
It's kind of like top to bottom.
About.
Oh,
It's the
yeah.
whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we're
Eyes
talking
to his
about it.
feet.
Did you know your feet point? If your feet point to someone, you're interested in the conversation. But if they're pointed away, you're not really wanting to be there.
Mhm.
Nonverbal communication.
Right on. Right on. Yeah. So, and this could be, and Paul seems to implants evil with deceit in his heart, and he always stirs up conflict. So it goes in and it shows kind of the seat, the birthplace of this evil. Plots evil, deceit with his heart, and then it shows the results. It starts in the heart, evil in the heart, and then it shows the results, always stirring up conflict or contention or disunity. So, again, the opposite of God, which brings unity and comfort and peace.
Well, there's a lot that looks at Proverbs as pointing back to Genesis. And so you've already mentioned the whole God, this is what happens when God speaks. Things are brought into existence. Things are created, right? This guy's worthless. So he's kind of the opposite of that, causing conflict and destruction with his words rather than creation and goodness, which is what God does. And so, so maybe it really is speaking sort of back and forth to Genesis, sort of a take on almost what we do when we do the opposite or don't follow what God has set out for us to do. Like we should be about what God is about in terms of creating, bringing order, bringing goodness.
Yes. Yes.
But this is what evil is. It brings conflict. It points fingers. It says what mine says perverse in verse 12, perverse things, but y'all have a different word there. But causes trouble, twisted,
non-straight. And this is a point when we, and it seems like Paul gives the opposite of this when he talks about offering your bodies as living sacrifices, which is a tough one, which is like, what does that mean? But also the parts of your bodies as instruments of righteousness. So it's like our hands, our eyes, our mouth, our ears, every part that we can offer over to God as instruments of righteousness. And how often do we do that? And is that a constant thing going on with our bodies being the temple of the Holy Spirit? Is how much do we give God free reign in these bodies to interact with the world through us? One of the things with that wickedness, now when we read this, going back to the start of this here, did any of us think that's talking about us when it talks about the wicked in the villain?
Not usually. You always think that's talking about the other person.
Right. And I brought that up in one of my classes. Well, I was actually reading one of them, and I was like, okay. And then I started talking about the wicked people. And my prof kind of stopped me on that. And he said, when we read the word wicked in the Old Testament or in the New Testament, and if we don't at least consider ourselves in that group, what is that saying about us? It was some
Point the finger at one person, you always got 3 pointing back to yourself.
Yeah.
If you're always thinking about everybody else is wicked, then that's kind of like putting that's kind of like putting in an everybody else is always wrong while I'm always right kind of situation in a way.
In a way.
Yeah. Another way to say that may be arrogance. Arrogance, because we all know, right? I mean, that's our belief system, that we have all fallen short, that we are all a little marred through genetics and through our own actions and through the sin that is moved down, that we hurt ourselves and hurt others.
Yeah. And at the same time, there are certainly folks out there too that have, that are a lot of times constantly blaming themselves for things that have happened. So it can go the other way too.
Yes.
Maybe I'm the person that always, I'm not the wicked one, but there are some other people out there that are coming to a passage like this, and that's all they see. They see themselves in it.
It's always my fault.
Which I think also reminds us that in any troublesome spot in life, conflict, there's always, as we used to say growing up, it takes two to tango, right?
Yeah.
I contributed something, and the other person contributed something too. And I think a lot of times, 9 times out of 10, if in those moments of difficulty and distress and in life, that if we can acknowledge that, hey, I did something, you did something, and here we are.
Boy.
We can probably have a better chance of working through something than if it's always your fault or always my fault. It's never always your fault. It's never always my fault.
Right.
It always takes 2 or more people.
That's so good.
Right?
Isn't it?
That's a good lesson for you to be listening to it right now.
Yes. Yes.
For your future life.
Yes. It is. It's a mixed bag. And we know that because we can sit there and demonize other people or demonize ourselves. And all that is forgetting that we are all created in the image of God. And so at our essence, we are beautiful and lovely and
attitude.
honorable.
And remember the correct, right attitude, which is right here in Proverbs.
An attitude and a mindset can go a long way to who you are.
It certainly can. Yeah.
Change your mind, change your life.
Mind over matter, right?
Right.
Sometimes that's where you got to start.
Verse 15 has one of the few kind of prophetic sounding. This sounds more like the prophets than Proverbs.
Okay.
But it talks about the disaster that overtake people. And so how these things can sometimes fall on ourselves. And somebody, you kind of reap what you sow type of thing, or karma, all these different things. They come out. And then it gives kind of God's, in the second poem, it gives God's take on it and how this justice kind of works. And as we read this, the 6 and the 7 things are kind of numerical ways that people could understand them back then or remember them before they were written down. But it began what Miranda talked about. in this way, it's using the poetic language of haughty eyes, right?
Like, what does that word mean, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Haughty.
haughty.
That's not a word I grew up with.
Uh-uh.
I'm just saying.
Uh-uh.
What does haughty mean?
Any thoughts? Who knows haughty?
I've been raised around it. I have no clue what they ever mean by it, though.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah. From my understanding, it's just what you were saying. It was the eye that thinks you are better than other people.
So a bit arrogant,
Arrogance.
presumptuous.
Yeah, seeing yourself as better and others as less than.
A little bit selfish.
Yeah. So it marries back again with all the body parts here: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked scheme. Again, the heart
Mm-hmm.
it notifies, which, in my understanding, and you can understand, the heart's kind of like the soul of the person, right? And it encompasses kind of your personality, what you think, what you feel, and what you do.
Yep.
Is that correct? And
Yeah. In the Hebrew of the Bible, it's not just here. It's actually here and here and here. It's mind. It's all that gut feeling, but it's also thinking. It's all of it, because they didn't separate those ideas. Another thing, I don't know if you were going to pull this out, but if you look at this, you got three things: haughty eyes, lying tongue, hands that shed innocent. Mine says innocent blood. Hands that shed innocent blood. Then the fourth thing is the heart, and then you get three more things: feet that run to evil, false witness who pours out lies, person who spreads discord among family members. In other words, the heart thing is in the middle, and that's the way Hebrew poetry works. It's got three. It'll have one or two or three. Whatever's in the middle of that set of things is the key thing that it's trying to point you is most important.
That's right. I'm forgetting. Yeah.
So there you
the
go.
name of it, but it makes a sandwich in there,
Sandwiches.
and it climaxes in the middle, and then it comes back down. Yeah, that's a great point. So all those things are building to that. They're all body parts they run into, and then it ends up after the heart and the feet, and then it's kind of communal actions and how they affect others. So a false witness who pours out lies, and a person who stirs up, again, ending in conflict with one another. So it's saying evil causes these conflicts.
So
And
it's interesting. Yeah.
Yes.
It starts really small with your eyes. It moves to your tongue, your hands, your heart. It runs further and further big until it's the whole community.
Yeah.
By the end of the list.
And I wondered as I was reading this if perhaps that maybe, I don't know, whatever. It seems like Jesus kind of gives the other side of the coin on this in the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes. Because he starts out with, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, and for theirs is the kingdom of God, and blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." Kind of the opposite of the haughty eyes.
Oh, wow.
Right? And then, and he says, "Blessed are the pure in heart." And we both had both of those things about impure heart. Is that seed? And he said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God, and blessed are the peacemakers. They will be called God's children." So Jesus kind of gives the opposite of these things when he's giving the Sermon on the Mount. So as all the issues that villains have and how it doesn't work out, Jesus said, "Happy are you when you're opposite of these things, when you go the other way."
I wonder. So you almost wonder if he had those in mind when he was offering the Beatitudes. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I almost want to line them up side by side and see if are they 1-to-1? Yeah.
They're not. They're not,
No,
because there's more of those, but there seem to be some correlation there.
Correlation,
He seemed to cover the same points, but give the positive spin on it, the proactive approach to it. And it's probably important for us to remember that Jesus also said, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you," so that we don't have to be caught up in those things, and we can be free of the hurt that other people do it. Now that's a journey.
Mm-hmm.
There's no doubt about it.
It's always going to be a long journey.
Yes, yes. But that's like the goal. Like a lot of Jesus' teaching. I mean, he didn't do things halfway.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is like the primo human divinity come together.
The one
you know.
thing I can think about whenever we say the journey is anytime, like Jason preached a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, how whenever you're going through hard times, it's not always just your footprints, it's Jesus's. And it's either right beside you or it's just his, because he'll help you through it no matter what.
Yeah. Classic. And right. Yeah. That's totally right. Yeah, God's presence here with us. And I think that's a big part of what they're saying with our bodies and with our human relations and all this stuff. That God, that's how the world knows God's there, is through God's people and God's creation, and we're included in that. Yeah, so it's important to love and to pray for those who have hurt us, even to get to that point or work towards that point. But even, I have written down here in my notes, even if that enemy is ourselves sometimes. To remember God's grace and mercy, to share that. And
Sometimes we're our own worst enemy.
Yes. Yes.
It says love your enemy. The Bible says love your enemy. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
It never says your enemy, specifically the other person. It says the enemy in general, whether that be yourself, another person, the society, the world. It says love your enemy.
Whatever your enemy is, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good point, because a lot of times we're always looking at the other person.
Boy, yeah, that's a lot.
There's a lot of that in this one today.
There is.
Look back at yourself.
Another thing,
Know
it says,
thyself.
another thing,
Yeah.
it says love your enemy. All right. Another thing is somewhere in the Bible it says love your neighbor like you love yourself. Okay.
That's right.
If your enemy is yourself, it's still pointing back to the love yourself. Your enemy is yourself, but it says love yourself, thy neighbor like you love thyself. Therefore, no matter what, it comes full circle.
Comes full circle. Yeah, always right back to that encouragement to love. Right?
Yeah. To receive and give gifts and know how to do this. I'll end with this, and then I met an old preacher one time, and he was like 78 or something, and he had been in ministry since he was a teenager. And I talked to him after his deal, and after he did the deal, and he said, and I hope I never forget this, it's been years, but he said, the only thing I have to give to God is my weakness.
The only thing I have to give to God is my weakness.
It's my weakness. So all those years of ministry, he recognized that that was a gift from God, shared through him. And that God already had that. And that all these positive attributes were God's to begin with, shared with us.
All the things that I can do were gifts from God to begin with. But the only thing that I truly have that I can give back is where I'm weak.
It's my weakness.
Because God didn't give me the weakness.
No.
That was mine.
That's ours, and that's what God doesn't have until we give it to him. And that's what he's calling us to.
Wow. Maybe a lot of this haughty eyes and lying tongue and wicked heart and all that stuff is our attempts to ignore our weakness and try to think that we're more than we are and not actually give.
Not living in true reality. God's reality. That's it. Thanks, Jason.
Gosh, that's
And
great.
thank you all. This goes a lot better when y'all are here.
Everyone was out of town last week.
I'm a mess
We're
by
all
myself.
back though now. So, if you are with us online watching today, I do want to invite you to text if you want to, if you have a prayer concern to share, because we're getting ready to go into a time of prayer and concerns and joys and all the other good stuff happening too. But you can text pray, the word pray, to 910-892-2711. And it'll just let you share your prayer request with us right there, and we'll be able to lift that up We don't ask you to type those into the Facebook or the YouTube chat because we know that those can sometimes be more private. You're welcome to do that, but we encourage you to text the word pray to 910-892-2711. I think and I hope I said that right, and I'll throw it on the screen there for you. Look at there. There it is. Text pray to that number, and we'd love to hear your prayer concern, and we'll lift that up for you today. If there's anything that we can do for you. Joni and I are back in town after being gone for 10 days, so we'd love to hear from you, whether you are part of the church family for a long time or whether you're watching for the first time. We'd love to hear from you. So take care. God bless. You can join us on the conference call at 563-999-1222, and we'll have our time of prayer with the folks on the conference call, but we'll sign off of all the internet streams right now as we head over to that conference call line, 563-999-1222, and we'll see you there.
Have you already joined that